Welcome everybody to a new Alchemy Stars video. And guys, today we're going to talk about the new RRR banner coming this week. And I would say it's going to be a contradictory banner. I think it's the right way to put it. So we're going to start with Sariel. Sariel is a 6-star Water Forest Aurorian from Barton, and she is actually one of the very valuable 2-turn cooldown converters. So let's go into her abilities and see what I mean by that. Her active skill is Turbid Wheel, and it has a 2-turn cooldown with Preemptive Strike, and it converts 4 of the nearest red or green tiles to blue. Her chain skill is called Tidebreaker, and she has a chain combo 4, 8, and 13. Her chain combo 4 deals 130% damage 3 times assigned randomly to enemies within 2 surrounding clusters of this unit, and when a target takes damage more than once, the damage from the second time forth is halved. It's the same for her chain combo 8 and 13, except that they deal 140 and 150% damage respectively. And finally, her equipment is called Drizzle Curtain, and it grants Sariel a Sariel mark up to 8 stacks, and each stack increases Sariel's defense by 6%. She also retains 50% of the stacks at the end of the round. So having preemptive on her active skill is already a massive deal because she is a converter. So converters with preemptive is always going to be a massive deal. Add to that a 2-turn cooldown and you have a staple for your water team. Everything else, meaning her chain combo and equipment, are just nice little bonuses, but the most valuable part of Sariel are going to be her converting abilities. Let's go over her chain combo and equipment just to be thorough. So her chain combo has a very low percent. They actually have very low percentages on top of Sariel not having super high stats due to being a converter. Add to that the RNG and the fact that enemies that get hit more than once take half damage, and Sariel is actually just going to hit like a wet tissue, pun intended. The wording on her equipment is a little clunky as usual. Sariel gains a mark whenever she gets hit, which is not really clear from the wording. I talked about this when we went over Pitman, but the added defense, even though it's nice, you are definitely not going to be wanting to take damage to get hit, right? Like, you're definitely going to take Sariel to difficult events to help you out with her converting abilities, and that means that in difficult events especially, you don't want to get hit. So this is not a great equipment. Let's see if her Ascensions actually change anything. Her Ascension 2 grants her an extra line on her equipment. Now Sariel gains up to 50% extra defense the lower her health is. But this is better, but still subpar, right? It's still not great since the fact that you don't want to get hit still stands. And meanwhile, her Ascension 3 grants her the ability to create up to 2 enhanced tiles from the ones that she converts. This is a much more useful ability that you will definitely be taking advantage of. Let's see now if it's worth summoning for her BTs. So her BT3 is exactly the same as the other 2-turn cooldown converters, meaning that if you don't use her ability on the turn that it comes off cooldown, next turn you'll be able to convert 5 tiles instead of 4. This is yet another very conditional upgrade, since you will 90% of the time want to use her ability as soon as it's off cooldown. It's going to come in handy every now and then, but it's not something that you should rely on, and it's definitely not something that you should spend your flares on. Sariel's BT is not worth. As for her BT6, Sariel gets a 1-tile upgrade on her active, meaning that she can now convert 5 tiles on her off cooldown turn and 6 tiles if you wait 1 turn or more. This is nice and it will definitely help sometimes, but I would not recommend using an inhuman amount of Lumumber chasing 6-star dupes just to convert an extra tile. This VT is not worth. And finally, we have Sariel's overall score. I would say that she is a solid 8 out of 10. Her ability to preemptively and every 2 turns convert tiles to blue is almost a must-have in your water team, especially if you don't have something like Lecken or MBT Barton. However, the fact that her chain combo is not going to deal a whole lot of damage and her equipment relies on something that you definitely want to avoid severely hold her back from getting a higher score than an 8. So should you summon for her? Absolutely. She's going to be an absolute core part of your water team. So if you really need a converter for your water team, Sariel is going to be your girl. Sariel is worth summoning for. So it seems like people in desperate need of improving their water teams are actually going to be in luck this week, since next up we have Barton, another staple converter. In this case, it's the water cross converter, and that's a difficult word. Barton is a 5-star water thunder Aurorian from Illumina, and he is here to make your life easier. Sort of. Let's see what his abilities are. His active is a 5-turn cooldown, and it deals 450% damage to enemies in a cross shape to the maximum range and knocks enemies back. It also converts tiles in the area of attack to blue. As for his chain combos, he has a chain combo 2, 8, and 13 that deal 155, 155, and 160% damage respectively, in a 1 surrounding cluster, 12 tiles in a diamond shape, and 1 surrounding cluster and cross shape to the maximum range area respectively. Again, his equipment is called Suppressive Fire, and normal attacks can now fire diagonally and deal 35% of his damage. Very nice. So obviously the main attraction of this character is going to be his active skill. The ability to create a massive amount of blue tiles at a whim is incredibly powerful. The only thing that's seriously going to hold him back is of course the 5 turns steep cooldown. As for his chain combos, they have decent percentages and good support-like areas of effect, so I especially personally enjoy cross chains, but that's just me. His equipment is especially nice. Diagonal normals are a very sought out ability, and some of the best characters in the game have that ability for a reason. I'm looking at Sharon and Sinsa. Of course, Barton isn't going to be as powerful as Sharon and Sinsa, since his diagonal attacks are going to deal only a small percentage of his already low attack, but it certainly doesn't hurt that he has that ability. Moving on now to his ascensions, I'm going to review them as ones, since once again the wording is very tricky. So his Ascension 2 allows him to inflict 1 firepower mark whenever he lands a diagonal normal attack, and then all normal attacks gain a 10% damage upgrade on enemies that are marked, while his Ascension 3 allows that extra 10% damage to buff, that extra 10% damage buff to proc from every attack from Barton, meaning that enemies that are marked will receive an extra 10% damage from Barton's normals, as well as his active and chains instead of just his normals. It's a nice ability to have for sure, and you're certainly going to use it quite often, but it's not really game changing though. So let's go through his BTs. Barton's BTs are exactly the same as the other cross converters, meaning his BT2 reduces his cooldown by 1 turn, and his BT5 gives him preemptive strike. Should you summon for them? Well, yes and no. Do not summon for his BT2, because it's just not worth it. It's not going to make a big enough difference. If you'd probably much rather take some combination of Sariel, Klecken, Blank, and even Philishai before taking a BT2 Barton, unless it's a very specific kind of event in which you can take Barton because you know you're going to be there for a few turns, and you're actually going to be able to make use of his 4-turn cooldown, right? So as for his BT5, only summon for it if your Barton is already at BT4 or if you're a whale. MBT or max BT is where cross converters absolutely shine. They're going to make a night and day difference on your team, which leads me to Barton's final score. Barton is a definite 9 out of 10. The 1 point that's been subtracted here is due to him needing that BT5 to really become an absolute monster. Should you summon for him? Again, I would say only summon for him if you are already at BT4 or willing to summon until you get him to max BT. I would say if you don't have him, or if you have him at BT 2 or 3, right? Hold off, wait to pull him wait until you pull him off banner, until you get him all the way to BT4, and then whenever he shows up featured in a different banner, you can go for his BT5. But I would personally, as a free-to-play player, not go for him unless I have him at BT4. And finally, I left the best... Wait, my notes are upside down. Okay, there we go. And finally, I left the worst for last. Mia. Mia is a Thunder Fire 5-star sniper, and she is an independent Aurorian who doesn't need no player to put her in a team, which is great. Let's see what her abilities look like. Her active skill is Procession of Doom. It has a 2-turn cooldown and deals 200% damage to all enemies on the screen. The lower the enemy's HP, the higher the damage. And her chain skill, it's called Fiery Judgment, and she has a chain combo 4, 9, and 13. All of them deal 150% damage, and they deal the damage to the 2, 3, and 4 nearest enemies respectively. Her equipment, it's called Funeral Pyre, and Mia gains 1 stack of soul upon killing an enemy with her active skill up to 5 stacks. Each stack unleashes a blast that deals 40% attack damage. So her active skill actually starts out pretty well. A global active that has a 2-turn cooldown is nothing to scoff at. But the fact that she needs her enemies to already be at low health to increase her damage is not great. It means that she's going to need some setup. But I'll talk more about it as we move on. Her chain combos are again pretty nice. Global chains are pretty sweet, and her percentages are adequate considering that she has a very decent attack stat. Mia's equipment is where her flaws really start to show. She needs to kill enemies in order to increase her damage even more through blasts, which, wonky wording again, proc whenever she uses her low CD active. So the problem here is that I don't want to hit enemies until they're low health and then leave them alone until Mia's active is off cooldown so that I can gain a marginal attack buff for the next time that I want to use her active again. It's just not worth it, and it really nullifies the fact that her active has such a low cooldown, right? Because you need to use your active to increase the damage on your active so that in another 2 turns you can deal more damage. It's just not worth it. It requires too much setup. Let's see what her Ascensions have to say. Her Ascension 2 doesn't really solve the problem since it only adds a buff to her normal attacks and chains. Not great. And her Ascension 3 makes it so that she can gain those buffs anytime that any Aurorian in your team kills an enemy with an active, wonky wording again. This is marginally better, but again, it just doesn't really solve her problem, since you still require a lot of setup for this. Not to mention that 90% of the time you won't be taking a full team of Aurorians with offensive actives, since you want converters and healers. So let's take a look at her BTs. Her BT2 gives me a preemptive. This is fine if you want to deal some damage right off the bat when the round starts, but it just completely nullifies the rest of her kit, since enemies are obviously going to be at full health. It's just definitely not worth going for. Her BT5 gives her a 50% increase to her active skill. Negligible. Don't you dare summon for that. So overall, Mia is a pretty disappointing character. Her kit requires a lot of setup, and most of the time it's just unnecessary. Schwartz execute at 10% health on his BT2 is a lot more valuable if that's the kind of ability that you're looking for. If you really desperately need a sniper on your Thunder team, I would recommend that you wait for Schwartz to show up in an RRR, or even to go for Luke, who is featured in the two main banners right now. Mia is sadly going to be a 4 out of 10 and absolutely not worth summoning for, unless you really feel like you need to deal some damage every 2 turns for some reason. So overall, is this banner worth summoning on? Well, ironically enough, it's kind of a difficult question to ask or to answer. If you have a BT4 Barton, I would recommend to do the first multi and then just beg the RNG gods for that 25% chance of pulling him. If you're desperate, 25% chance because you need to win the 50-50 between Barton and Mia, and then you need to win the 50-50 between Barton and any other 5-star in the game, by the way. So that's a 25% chance of pulling Barton in your first multi. And so if you're desperate for a water converter, like I am, and you're willing to go deep, like I am, then I would definitely recommend that you try and go for Sariel. She's going to be a super valuable member of your water team. I personally am going to be summoning on this banner as if I had been in the desert for 2 years and Sariel was the last glass of water on the planet. That's how bad I need her for my water team. And if you pull on this banner and you get Mia, I'm sorry for your loss. Overall, this banner gets a maybe, since it's entirely going to be conditional on your box. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something. Leave a like if you did, leave a comment. What do you think? Are you summoning for it or not? Are you going to whale? Subscribe if you like more videos like this, and I'll see you guys on the next one.